Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. We're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before, albeit it's been a very long time actually since they were on the channel. The very first review I did from these guys was a solo brewery beer review back in 2016, and then more recently in 2020 I had a beer that involved this brewery as part of the collaboration. So yeah, this is going to be my first dedicated beer review to this brewery since 2016, which is scary to think actually, but it's definitely nice to see these guys getting their beers back on the market. So hopefully this is a good one, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to Arlöv, which is just a little bit to the northeast of Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Chad Beer. So this particular beer is called Ipa Specimen 3. It comes in at 8.5% ABV, and this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, this beer was released as part of the local Småska League assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for February of 2022. And as I've mentioned to you before, Chad Beer is part of the Molecule Brewery Collective, which includes Elm 11 and Nerd Brewing. So yeah, definitely cool to see these guys getting their beers out there again. These days it seems to be that the lagers and IPAs are being released under the name Chad Beer from Molecule, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, very curious to see what this one has in store for us, so let's crack on and see how we get on. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Chad Beer before, and we will see about adding more to that list in the near future now that they're starting to release beers again. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Chad Beer once again. So Chad Beer was founded by the Australian Chad Payton back in 2015 along with his wife Lisa, and they have been primarily based in the Malmö area in Skåne here in the south of Sweden. But Chad had previously been a geochemist, and he was a long-time home brewer back home in Australia, but he apparently first encountered craft beer back in 2002 in Idaho over in America, and he began to experiment with brewing when he got back home to Melbourne. But apparently he also used to make his own malt for a period of time too, but he decided that he was going to focus more on actually brewing the beer. But he later got a research job in Copenhagen and subsequently lived in Sweden, and that's how he ended up in Malmö. But originally Chad Beer was a gypsy brewery, but in 2015 he set up a 400 litre brewhouse in Svedala, which is just out to the east of Malmö, very close to Malmö airport actually, and the first beers were brewed there in December of 2015. But over the course of 2016 he brewed about 20,000 litres of beer, continuing as a gypsy brewer basically, but then later he moved to the Lilla Ölfabriken factory in Rosengård in Malmö city. But a little bit later on, there weren't too many beers released from these guys over the years actually, but a little bit later in March of 2021 a new collective brewery called Molecule was announced, and this would include Elm 11, who do the lovely big fruity juicy sours, Nerd Brewing, who do the big imperial stouts, and of course Chad Beer as well. And the new brewery is based in Arlöv to the northeast of Malmö, and it starts off with a 1,500 litre brew kit. So the way that this company is structured is that Molecule is the company, and there are basically three different beer brands. So Elm 11 is the brainchild of Anders Kvist, the lovely guy who does these big fruity juicy sour beers. Nerd Brewing is Hannes Gruber, who does the big imperial stouts, and then of course Chad Beer is Chad Payton, and he does the IPAs and the lagers and stuff like this actually. But yeah, it's mainly Anders from Elm 11 who does the brewing, from what I understand. He's the main brewer within the Molecule Brewing Collective. So a lot of the nerd stuff, pretty much all the Chad stuff, and the Elm 11 things, it's all Anders that brews these. But the name Chad Beer apparently was just used as a kind of working title for the brewery, and it was intended that this would be changed, but it's never really been shaken off, and it's just stuck. But as of February 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced around 30 different beers under the Chad name, and as I've mentioned a few times, it is mainly IPAs and lagers that are being released under the Chad beer brand. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Chad Beer for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, this should be a really nice one. I've heard good things about this. But yeah, let's crack on and see how we go with this. I'm very curious to try my first Chad beer in about, 2 years if you include the collaboration, but 6 years before that. So yeah, just to give you a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, it actually, the background and stuff in this is quite similar to what you'd see from Elm 11, but more of a kind of pencil drawing with the insects, the praying mantis, actually. Very crazy insect that. If you go and read about praying mantises, they do some really insane stuff. But as you can see, it's a nice gold can that this one is in, and it tells you a little bit about the beer on the side here. So as we said earlier, this one is simply called Ipa Specimen 3. It comes in at 8.5% ABV. The yeast in this one is a Verdant yeast, of course, after Verdant, the English craft brewery. The bittering hop is Chinook. The late addition hop is Mosaic. The dry hops are Citra, Motueka and Nelson Sauvin. So we know all of these hops quite well. Chinook, about 12% alpha acid, big grapefruity notes and kind of piney resins. Mosaic, 14% alpha acid, kind of nice tangerine flavours. Citra, 14% alpha acid again, big mango notes, and in New England IPAs it's going to give you quite a bit of lemon lime. Motueka, New Zealand hop, this one from New Zealand hop, gives you about 8% alpha acid, big limey notes. Nelson Sauvin, of course, New Zealand as well, and that's about 16% alpha acid, big white green grapey characters. So yeah, the other 3 hops I forgot to say are American. But yeah, nicely presented beer. This one, 440ml can, and I think I paid about 55 Swedish kronor for this. So that translates to roughly €5.50, about £5 sterling, and I guess somewhere in the region of like $6.50, $7 American for those of you watching over there. But for an 8.5% New England double IPA, this is going to be pretty good. The only thing I can think really to compare this beer to would be, I believe it was called The Switch. Nerd Brewing released a New England IPA a couple of years back, and I picked up a can of it in Copenhagen, and it was very, very nice actually. But yeah, the Switch from Nerd Brewing was a really good New England IPA, so maybe I'll be thinking a little bit about that when I try this one. But yeah, they've released a couple of lagers, and a few of the IPAs have been in the pubs around Malmö, but I've never tried any of them actually. Don't tend to drink beer that much outside of the channel these days, to be honest with you. But yeah, plain gold gold top on the can there, which looks very nice. But let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very curious to see what Chad Beer have in store for us, and really nice, as I say, to see them getting this brand out there once again. That was something that when I spoke to Hannes and Anders, they were saying that was something they were looking to do, was get some more beers under the Chad Beer name out there a little bit. So nice to see that they've gotten round to that. And I'll say straight away, as soon as you open the can on this one, you can smell this one is very, very nice actually. The aroma is very, very juicy. So let me just line that up again so that my OCD is happy, and there we go. So yeah, before the head disappears on this one, because I think it's going to disappear quite quickly, it's poured with quite a bumpy half finger white head there, and that's faded away pretty much instantly. There's a nice little bit of ring around the edge of the glass there, and a wee bit of a kind of thin foamy layer across the middle of the beer. But overall, it does look pretty nice. As you can see, the colour of this one is a lovely, very, very bright yellow. I always like comparing the New England IPAs in terms of appearance to different fruit juices. This one for me looks very much like a kind of mango juice, to be honest with you. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. That goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in are also going to play a role there. But yeah, you don't really have to care about those particular variables when it comes to New England IPAs quite often. The level of haze in this one, I'm looking at that, it's not the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs that I've come across in the 8.5% bracket. But yeah, it's got a fair little bit of it. But remember, the level of haze in these beers depends on the oak content and wheat content primarily, and also the yeast. But I'm trying to think, this one has a verdant yeast in it, of course, but the verdant ones, I remember, are a little bit more like this. They are pretty hazy, but not the soupiest and gloopiest. So it kind of makes sense that this beer looks the way it does. But yeah, one or two big carbonation bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, and a couple of little ones just going up toward the bottom of the head there. But I mean, overall, it does look pretty nice, actually. I like how this beer appears. But yeah, I don't think there's anything else we really need to say about the appearance of this one. It's pretty much as you would expect for a New England IPA. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one then. This should hopefully be another nice beer, but I got a good whiff of it when we opened it up, and it certainly was quite pleasant. So let's look at it more closely. Oh yeah, that is pretty nice. Now, I'm going to say straight away, this one, again, it comes across as being fairly barley malt. Let me just see, does it have a... it says it's best before the 1st of February 2023, so I'm guessing it's been canned on the 1st of February. So we can say that it is pretty fresh, actually. I'm sure, knowing how Anders and Hannes and Chad are, they will be wanting this beer in the can pretty fresh and out into Systembolaget. They'll have timed it very, very well. But yeah, the way that this beer comes across, as I've told you, for me, there's 6 different things you need to think about with a New England IPA. They can either be a little bit yeasty, or they can also be a little bit rye leaning and grainy. Those 2 elements are a bit more common in American brewed New England IPAs, but they can be wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or a little bit kind of sweet and brown sugary. This one, for me, it really leans toward. The more kind of barley malt leaning and bready side of things, actually. So yeah, that's quite interesting for me with this one. The malt base on this is really nice, but the fruity side, the green component is quite floral, but the fruity side of things is nice and kind of juicy. So I really like how all of that goes together as well. So that gets a thumbs up from me. But yeah, aroma wise, this is quite a nice beer. But let's break it down for you just a little bit more. So backbone of the beer, definitely a nice little bit of a kind of bread crusty character, some fluffy white bread in there as well. Those 2 things forming the backbone of the beer. At the back of the nose, I do get a little bit of wheaty bitiness. Yeah, particularly if I take it in. Particularly if I take the aroma in a little bit more. If I take the aroma in a little bit more, kind of. How would we say? If I take the aroma in a little bit more, sort of. Deeply, you definitely get a little bit more of that kind of wheaty, bitey sort of thing out of it, which is great. But yeah, aroma wise, it's the malty side of things. Yeah, it really leans towards that more barley malt leaning bready side. I'm trying to see if I pick out any oatiness in it. There's a little bit of smooth oaty character in there, and it smells like quite a thick oaty note, in fairness. And maybe there's a wee touch of that Werther's original sweetness, but for me, this comes across as a really kind of barley malt leaning and bready New England IPA rather than anything else. So yeah, bread crust, soft white bread, wee bit of an oaty, creamy smoothness, and a little bit of a kind of a little bit of a wheaty bitiness in the back, and it was just a wee touch of sweetness. The malt base in this one, I'm going to be interested to see how that comes across in the actual flavour of the beer. But yeah, I don't think we need to say anything else about the malty side of it for just now. So let's take a closer look at the hoppy side of things then. I'm curious about this. So definitely there's a wee teeny touch of earthiness there, but that definitely takes a back seat to the big floral character that you're getting out of this one. You can smell a bit of the depth of that Chinook in there. As I always say, Chinook gives you a grapefruit and a kind of piney resinous character. But I would say that in this beer, because New England IPAs rely more on late edition and dry hopping, you always find that even if you have early edition hops, they don't really jump to the fore, and I think that's what Chinook's doing in here. It's taken a bit of a back seat, but you can smell a little bit of that depth to the floral side of things, so it's coming across as more of a floral aromaticity rather than a pine for me, like a very deep floral aromaticity. But yeah, the aroma on the grassy side of things is a little bit more kind of grassy, and it's a little bit more, the green component for me leans towards that floral side of things, but it definitely has a wee bit of that grassy, zesty sort of thing. So yeah, I really like how all of that goes together. But yeah, the green component certainly suits the rest of the beer, but the fruity side of things is very interesting. You can definitely smell a little bit of complexity in here. So yeah, for me, there's a lot going on in that fruity side of things. I get quite a little bit of passion fruit out of this one, and that's going to be, you get that slightly more pungent passion fruit, that's going to be from the Citra, but there's also a bit of the juicier mango, again from the Citra. And it's interesting, you can really smell, the other three hops in there as well, the Motueka, the Nelson Sauvin, and the Mosaic. So the Mosaic is giving you a wee bit of an orangey character, but I think the Nelson Sauvin with the sort of gooseberry, white, green, grapey sort of thing, and the Motueka, they're kind of combining together to make that the more prominent aroma. So for me, the two things that you're most likely to get out of this are the mango, and then that sort of gooseberry, white grape, limey kind of character. Those are coming out a wee bit more. And the lime kind of mixes with the grassy side of the beer to a degree as well. So yeah, aroma wise, this one I think is quite interesting for sure. Yeah, the aroma on this, the fruity side overall is quite juicy actually. I would say it's got quite a nice oily, juicy character to it. So yeah, for me it's got a good balance between a kind of the citrusy side of things and the more tropical side. So yeah, as I always say, take a little bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we had a taste of this beer. So yeah, this one is the Ipa Specimen 3, a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Chad Beer, part of the Molecule Brewery Collective in Arlöv near Malmö, here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. Let's fire the rest of that in, and we will have a taste of this one. Cool to see these guys getting their beer back in Systembolaget after a long time. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's pretty solid actually. Now, first impression of this one is that it's, for an 8.5%er, I would say I would expect it to be a little bit thicker. With a New England IPA, for me, one of the characteristics of that is you do just want a nice kind of thick mouthfeel to them. This one's very light and very, very clean. And I guess, in some way, because I know that Anders is brewing this, I know that it's Anders that's done most of the brewing for this, and when you try his beers through the Elm 11 side of things, they're always just these really thick, big, creamy sort of things. So maybe that's one of the preconceptions I've gone into with this review. So for me, this is actually in terms of its mouthfeel, this is a very, very light beer. It's certainly not lacking in flavour, and it is just quite nice and drinkable, but I think I would say this one, it maybe needs just a wee bit more thickness in the mouthfeel, but in terms of its flavour, it's pretty solid. So this is definitely worth a try actually. And as I say, this is one, I got this one because, as I say, I've not had a Chad beer in a long time. And I know, Anders and Hannes are very good brewers. Chad as well. I'm not sure how much involved in the brewing he still is actually, but he with these other two guys around him, he knows what he's doing. He's been a long-term home brewer, so yeah. This is nice. I mean, the more that you drink of it, the more that you get out of it. And I say, I'm starting to wonder with it, maybe my comments about the mouthfeel were a wee bit premature, because it's actually, It is actually more of a kind of wet and juicy IPA, this one, and that's fair. That is absolutely fair. So yeah, this is definitely worth a try. You know, if you like your Bibliotheques, your Stigbergets, your OO brewings, and your Brewskis, I guess, are the other one down here in Skåne. If you like these sort of beers, then this is definitely worth a try. It actually reminds me of a few of the New Englands that I've had from Malmö Brewing Company, actually. Hoolie Brewery do a very good New England IPA these days too. So this is absolutely worth a try. I look forward to seeing what they're going to do over the next wee while with these then. I'm trying to remember back to the Nerd Brewing switch to what that was like, if it was quite light in the mouthfeel. But yeah, as I say, one of the more lighter drinkable New England IPAs that I've had, especially 8.5%. That's probably another thing where I'm thinking about the mouthfeel. You do expect an 8.5% New England to be a bit thicker than this, but in terms of flavour, it doesn't lack anything, and it leans a little bit more towards the wheaty, bitey side of things, like a Trillium would, or like a Verdant. So that makes sense. Maybe this beer is kind of modelled on the flavours that you would get from some of the Verdant ones, because I always remember the Verdant beers that you get in England. Those are a little bit more wheaty and bitey, of course. But yeah, this one is very nicely done. It gets a big thumbs up to me. But to be honest, I would not expect anything less from Molecule as a group. These guys really know what they're doing. The Nerd Brewing Stouts are really top quality. The Elm 11 Sours are. So it's nice to see them using the Chad Beer brand to get some lagers and IPAs out there. So hopefully we see some West Coast. I'd love to see a West Coast IPA from Chad Beer, and maybe a black IPA as well, because I don't think that's anything I've had from any of the three brewers, come to think of it. But yeah, let's break this beer down for you and describe it as we always do. So middle third of your palate then, you do get a tiny little touch of bread crust just forming the base of the beer, maybe a little bit of a kind of Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing going on as well. So yeah, a little bit of Jacob's cream crackery sort of thing going on, wee bit of bread crust. On top of that, there's a little bit of white bread, and then you can feel the wheat just kind of thickening it all out. So what I would say about this beer as well, though, is that on top of that, you actually don't have too much in the way. Well, I don't think it's right to say too much in the way of. I think it's more right to say that the oaty character that you get in this beer is not overly creamy. So you've got a little bit of bread crust and sort of cream cracker. You've got a wee bit of you've got a bit of a kind of dense white bready layer, but that's quite thin. And then on top of that, you get a thicker wheaty sort of thing. On top of that, you can feel like almost like a hardened, densified oaty character. This beer is definitely not the creamiest of New England IPAs. I think that's the thing. And as I say, when it's 8.5% ABV, you maybe expect just a wee bit of that more kind of creamy oaty sort of thing. You maybe expect a bit of a thicker mouthfeel from it. But yeah, this beer for me, the mouthfeel, the malty side of this beer is almost just a little bit crisp. And I think that's maybe what's caught me off guard with it a little bit. So yeah, it has got that nice kind of, it has got a bit of that crispness to it, but you can feel on top of the wheat layer feels quite dense and quite thick, and then on top of that, yeah, on top of that you have the kind of oatiness in there. And I think the further you go into the aftertaste, the oaty character kind of mellows out a little bit and sweetens up a wee bit. Then in the dead centre of your palate, you've got a nice little circle. You've got a nice little kind of circle there, and that's where you get the kind of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing out of this beer. So yeah, I really like how that goes together as well. But yeah, I'm surprised at how kind of, not thin, but how kind of crisp the middle third of the palate is with this one. But yeah, it goes together very, very well. Yeah, let's focus on the back third of the palate then with this one. I don't think there's anything else to say about the middle third, to be honest with you. So yeah, border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of bready build up in there. The base of that back third of the palate is a little bit more kind of bread crusty, as we say. You get a bit more graininess out of this. Remember, pardon me, on the back On the back third of your palate, that's what you know. On the back of your palate, you'll get more kind of bitter, grainy sort of flavors, whereas further forward, you'll get sweeter flavors. So yeah, the bread crusty thing is a little bit more grainy on that back third of your palate. On top of that, you get a wee bit of a more bready, grainy sort of thing. Then on top of that, you get a bit more of a kind of wheaty, bitey kind of character. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. But yeah, on top of all of that, the wheatiness as well is a wee bit more biting. Like I say, this one really leans towards that more Trillium Verdant side of things, the more wheaty, bitey New England IPAs. But then on top of all that, you do get a wee bit of yeastiness, and I think the yeasty character for me feels like quite a dense. It feels like quite a dense, doughy, bready, yeasty sort of thing. So I do like that about it. Yeah, that nice kind of dense, doughy, bready, yeasty sort of thing. And it has a little bit of a crackery note to it, a little bit of an almost kind of spicy, grainy element. So yeah, that goes together really quite well, and that just sits on top of the wheat, like I said. But on the back third of your palate, the flavour is definitely taller. And as you come further forward into the middle third of the palate, it just condenses down a wee bit, and everything kind of squashes together. So yeah, I like how that goes together in this one. The malty side of things, it has grown on me a little bit, but like I say, I think it could do with just a wee bit more OT creaminess, especially at the 8.5%. This, see if you did this as like this kind of the vibe that this beer has. For me, it actually reminds me of some of the lower ABV things that I've had from Brewski in recent times. It has a bit more of that wheaty bite and wheaty zip to it. So yeah, I think for me, this is just a kind of personal opinion. Remember, beer is always subjective. Different people like different things. But yeah, when it comes to the lower ABV IP New England IPAs, I like them to be a bit more kind of wheaty and bitey. Whereas when it comes to the higher ones, I personally like them to be a little bit more kind of creamy and oaty, and sometimes a little bit sweet as well. So yeah, this is a good beer. But for me, this is the sort of vibe that this one has in the malt base is a bit more to my tastes for the lower ABV things rather than the higher ABV things. But yeah, it's a nice beer, so thumbs up to Chad Beer. Let's kind of look at the hoppy side of things then. So, green component first, it's kind of what I would expect. Back corners of the palate, wee bit of earthiness. As you come further forward, you can feel that nice depth from the Chinook in there. But as you move towards the front corners of the palate, it's definitely a little bit more kind of floral and aromatic. Then round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of that lighter, grassy sort of thing going on. So yeah, that works. That works really, really quite well. It's got a nice kind of zesty, grassy sort of character to it. But yeah, for me, it does get a big thumbs up in that regard. So yeah, I like that. I definitely like that. So yeah, nice kind of zesty, grassy sort of thing around the front corner of the palate, but yeah, nice deep floral aromaticity, but a little bit of spiciness on the front corners of the palate. Let's look at the front third of the palate and the fruity side of things then. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a nice little bit of bready build up there, and you can feel that the base of that front third of the palate is a little bit more bready and a kind of thick wheaty white bread, and then on top of that you get the nice oily, how do you say, that nice kind of oily, fruity kind of thing out of it, and then all of the hops are really showing their heads quite nicely in this. So let's go through that. So yeah, toward the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of the more kind of pungent passion fruit from the citra, but that very, very quickly gives way to a more sort of oily, mangoey character. I do get a few sort of apricot-y and pineapple-y notes as you move towards the middle of that front third of your palate, which is quite nice. But then as you move into the front half of that front third of your tongue, that's when you start to see the Mosaic, the Motueka, and the Nelson Sauvin doing their thing. So for me, it's difficult to pick out which one's the base layer, but I'm getting some of the white, grapey, gooseberry sort of things from the Nelson Sauvin. As you reach the kind of front tip of your tongue, you can feel the more oily, limey character of the Motueka, and then as you go further into the aftertaste, I think some of the tangerine orange from the Mosaic pushes its way through. So yeah, I really like how all of that goes together in this one. yeah, the fruity side of this one actually it's quite oily in a sense, and I do quite like it. It's not the thickest oily fruity character you get out of this, but still, I do find it quite oily in a sense. So yeah, this is quite an interesting beer, and I do really like the fruity side of things. The nice kind of juicy mango with a wee bit of the apricotty pineapple kind of thing, and then the combination of the Motueka, Nelson Sauvignon, and the Mosaic. I think that goes together very, very well too. So yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business on the fruity side of things, I think that's probably the highlight of this one actually, is the fruity side of it. So it gets a thumbs up from me in that regard. So yeah, solid New England IPA, this one. But let's round off this review with a look at the mouthfeel. As I've said a few times through the video, I find this one a little bit light. I think this is, for an 8.5% New England double IPA, this one is pretty damn light in its mouthfeel. So I'd say it's mid-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. It does have a wee bit of an oily slickness to it, which is interesting. In terms of IBUs, I think it's about 35. Yeah, I think this is about a kind of maybe 35, 40 IBU beer at the most. I think it's a wee bit more bitter. But yeah, the malt base is lovely and smooth. But as I say, a little bit light. It could just do with a wee bit more oaty presence to it at that ABV. This would be cracking. If you took this down to 6% or something, it would be bang on the money in that sense. I think it needs a wee bit more creaminess at that ABV. But yeah, the malt base is really nicely done. The green component gives you a little bit of bite to it, and then you've got lovely oily, juicy, fruity characters to this one, which come out really nicely. So yeah, it's a really solid effort, this one. I'll need to keep an eye and see what these guys are going to do next month actually. But yeah, lovely beer, this one, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, this was the IPA Specimen 3 from Chad Beer, one of the Molecule brewery collective, I guess we could say, brands in Arlöv near Malmö here in Skåne in the south of Sweden. So yeah, nice to return to these guys after such a long time. But thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Chad Beer, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point fairly soon. But thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Sláinte, skål, cheers, check out this beer. I think it's very interesting.